All right. All right. Well, hello, Heather. Thank you for joining us live, and everyone that's catching the recording this evening. I'm really looking forward to tonight's masterclass because I think a lot of us, especially over the holiday season, sometimes getting together with family can bring up some tricky energies and just different feelings, triggers, all of these things. I know personally, I have been doing a lot of work on healing, my inner child and the mother wound, the father wound, all of that. And yet I still am, experiencing deeper layers of, what can be revealed through this journey. And so I had some stuff come up for me over the holidays, and I thought, what a perfect time to do this master class, so that we can, yeah, continue to heal. Or maybe this is a new topic to you, something that you're just starting to explore. I know we're all at kind of like different phases in our journey. But what I wanted to go into tonight is we're definitely going to focus on like healing the inner child and looking at, what the inner child is and how we can connect with them. We'll also be talking a little bit about the importance of, healing the mother wound and the father wound and its relation to the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and even just these masculine and feminine energies that we all have within, and how, if there's any wounded aspects there, that can also kind of show up in our lives. And we will be talking about returning to our true nature. So really understanding that as much as, our childhood plays a huge role in, who we are today, and a lot of the programming and conditioning that we receive as children, will go deep into that. At the end of the day, these are just experiences that we've had, and we learn so much through experience. And I really do see, the earth, I guess you could call it, like this whole experience of being on earth as a school, and, us coming here to learn lessons, and our soul is wanting to grow and evolve. And so a lot of these experiences are really just offering us these keys and these lessons and this wisdom, on our way back to really returning to our true nature and understanding who we are at our core and what we are. And yeah, so we will kind of go into that a little bit. And then I'm hoping to also do a guided meditation at the end where we can go in and we can connect with our inner child and do a little like energy healing. Also, remembering that everything that I share, you guys, I say this all the time, but it's important to just state this, is, just take everything with a grain of salt, run it through your own consciousness, allow yourself to kind of discern the information that I am sharing with you. And just take what resonates, right? If there's anything I say, anything that I share that doesn't fully resonate or feel true, you can allow yourself to, sit with it for a little bit. We're not just discarding anything that doesn't feel resonant, but we're also, only holding on to what does. And also, when we do this healing meditation, this guided meditation, um, I'm not the one healing you, you are healing yourself. And I think that's really important to point out as well, and beautiful. Like, you guys don't need me to do this. I'm just kind of sharing templates and information for you to go in and explore and journey through your own inner world to see what you find, right? And knowing that you have the power to heal and shift and clear anything, transmute it all. So if Heather, do you have any questions? Like, was there anything that you wanted to say or ask before we begin?
No, I think I'm good. I'm just really excited to go into this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll probably just kind of, as normal, I'll just kind of flow through things. I do have notes here, trying to
Mhm.
kind of keep me on track. Tonight might go a little bit longer than normal, and we'll check in later to see if we want to go into the meditation tonight, or what I can do if we go too late. I can always just kind of like record one and send that out with the recording. So yeah, everyone can have that as well. We'll see how late we go though. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or just like in the chat, I'll try and pay attention to that. I also have to pay attention to Rena because I know she wants to join. So yeah, hopefully I don't miss her. All right. Okay, so to begin, we're going to start with identifying the mother and the father wound and kind of how we can really come to see what it is that's wanting to be healed. With anything on our healing journey, I really recommend that we don't go digging and trying to find things. I think, a lot of things just come to the surface naturally, and that's really all that we need to focus on. So, obviously, just checking in with yourself and you'll know, right? If there's something that is showing up in your relationship with your mom or with your dad or from the past that's, memories are starting to resurface, we can see those just as invitations for us to continue healing those aspects of ourselves or diving deeper to just see what that's revealing to us. And I know I've said this before, but healing begins when, there's awareness, right? So it begins with awareness. Once we have this awareness of this wound or this memory or, this feeling of disconnect with a certain partner or relationship that we may have in our life, we're already starting the healing process by bringing our attention and our awareness to it. Because a lot of the times, we may just naturally want to kind of suppress or push to the side or just ignore, certain situations or things that are arising. But once we are able to really look at what's there and what's in front of us and bring our attention and our awareness to it, it's amazing how much healing can take place just by doing that. And I know a lot of you that are watching this, or Heather even being here live, like a lot of you guys have been doing these master classes consistently. And the first one we did was on embodied presence and focusing on loving awareness, right? And cultivating this energy and really understanding how this loving awareness, this awareness can hold us and support us and heal us through this process. So I would recommend just, if you haven't already done this, maybe getting out your journal. You don't have to do this right now, but in your own time, and just kind of looking at the ways that you talk to yourself, right? Like that voice of the inner critic. What are, constant phrases or criticisms that you find are just kind of showing up in your thoughts, right? And tracing those back, right? Was that something that you were told as a child? A lot of the times, the first 7 years of our life are where we're the most impacted, right? And this is where we're really being programmed, and everything that we learn as children is basically gets stored in our subconscious mind and acts as these programs that run 95% of the time. Our conscious mind is really only operating about 5% of the time. So we can see how, the behavior of our parents, the way they spoke to us, some of their patterns and some of their some of their traumas and their wounds as well, how that can have an impact on ourselves as well. So we're really just wanting to identify, right? What these wounds are, what these patterns are, what the conditioning is that we have received from our childhood. And I want to talk a little bit about trauma because trauma will definitely play a role in this. And I think, there's different definitions of trauma, and, some people will classify trauma as being like overt traumas, which are really kind of drastic traumas that could include like the loss of a parent at a young age, or, physical or sexual or verbal, like abuse, or really intense, like abusive relationships. It could be like abandonment or some sort of betrayal, maybe a divorce, or the loss of a parent in a way that they weren't always present, right? You may not have physically lost them, but maybe they weren't always there, right? So we can often see that as being trauma, but then we sometimes overlook that trauma really doesn't have anything to do with the experience. It's more so how the nervous system is reacting to what we're experiencing. And I think with a lot of like families, especially if you have siblings, sometimes there may be one sibling that had more difficulties, or kind of looks back on your childhood in a different way than the other, because of the way that the nervous system responded to what was happening as a child. And so it's really important to understand that we're all just such unique individuals, and it really doesn't matter like what happened. Obviously it matters what happened, but it could be the smallest thing as, you know, crying as a baby, and there not always being someone there to soothe you, or being given food when really you needed your diaper change, or right, some need basically not being met. So a lot of this has to do with our needs. And a lot of it also has to do with how we were modeled love, right? Because our first introduction to what love is through the parents, right? And so as we can see, these are things that we carry with us, because our needs are not ever going to leave us, right? We're human, we all have our own basic human needs. And as children, we rely on someone else to meet our needs, because we're not in a position where we're able to obviously take care of ourselves and meet our own needs. So there can be a huge disconnect there when our needs are not being met. But when it comes to this work and what we're going to be talking about tonight, it's really learning how we can parent ourselves or reparent ourselves, and really taking that role of being our primary caregiver, and learning how to just take radical responsibility for ourselves, for our healing, knowing that, we're not being victims, even if we may have felt like victims in certain situations. Of course, we need to acknowledge that, but we're also not attaching to being a victim and wearing this as our identity, right? That's something that a lot of people can kind of fall into, especially coming into this work and realizing how much maybe trauma they may have experienced as a child. It can feel really frustrating and hard for us, confusing even. Just there's a lot that can come up, right? And it's easy to kind of fall in that trap of being a victim and holding this victim consciousness, which is really going to be reflected back to you in every relationship that you have, where you're going to be made to feel like a victim, because that's a core belief that you're holding on to, right? So one of the things that I learned when I was first exploring this was really learning to understand that our parents are also human, and they also went through their own traumas and experiences that conditioned them and programmed them into who they were. And our generation, we're coming from, if you're in your late 20s to early 30s. I should have done some research to know the exact dates of what it is, but I know my generation, and a lot of you here, are part of the generation where our Pluto is in the constellation of Scorpio. And so Scorpio and Pluto are planets that are really, or that positioning is really all about transformation and alchemy and healing, and going into some of like the darkness and the heaviness and the things that not everyone is always willing to look at, so that we can find the light and we can come back to wholeness and we can really heal all aspects of ourselves. And so there's so much energy that's coming onto the planet right now, where, you know, I'm sure you've all been witnessing this, right? There's so much more desire for us to heal, and we're seeing the state of the world right now. And as I'm sure many of you know, right, our internal state is basically what's being reflected back to us in our outer world, in our reality. And so we're at this point where we're really starting to have to turn within and look at how we're contributing to a lot of the chaos and the separation and the hate and the crimes and the abandonment and abuse and all of these things that we're seeing reflected back to us in the world, right? In our personal relationships and on a collective level. And so this wasn't always as present. And so I think it's also important to have that compassion for our caregivers, our mothers, our fathers, you know, what they had to live with, and not having the tools, not having the internet, not having access to, you know, masterclasses and podcasts and, you know, sharing circles and all of these things that we have today. So I think that's just kind of important to point out. And yeah, of course, not bypassing that we may have been victims in certain situations, right? And so, yeah, so basically what we talked about there was really kind of identifying the wounds, right? Is it, you know, more of a mother wound or more of a father wound? You'll know there's usually one that's a little bit more dominant. But it's also important to look at both, because oftentimes, you know, there's one that's quite obvious and we feel like we have to give all of our energy and our attention into healing that relationship. It may be because, you know, physically that relationship um, may be really difficult, and there may be another parent that we get along fine with and there's not as much tension or whatever. There's not as many triggers, right? We can look at our triggers to really help us identify where there is those woundings, because if we are going to be triggered by anything, that's really just showing us that there's some layer within us that, you know, was hurt and was wounded, and that's just being revealed. So looking at both relationships. And I think, yeah, so I wrote down here, so where, yeah, where we were first introduced to love and how we were modeled love as children. And I have some questions that I want to share with you guys if you want to kind of write them down, things that you can kind of journal on or reflect upon. Maybe I can include these in the email when I send out the recording. But I think really what's most important when we start this process of reparenting and doing the inner child healing work is identifying our needs, right? So I think, yeah, we all know we have these basic human needs that include like shelter and food and water and, you know, all of these things. But then we can look at it as, you know, safety, for example, or love, right? So how are we wanting that need to be met? Or what does that look like for us? What does that feel like for us, right? What is our definition of safety? What is our definition of love, right? Looking at expectations that we may have of others to give us and provide us with those needs. Because here again, right, it's about taking radical self-responsibility. And we're adults now, right? So we don't need to rely on anyone else to meet our own needs. It's really taking responsibility for ourselves to ensure that our needs are being met. And that's not to say that, you know, we can't rely on others for support and have relationships and receive love or support or anything from anyone outside of ourselves. That's not it. But if that's something that we are needing, then there needs to be communication around that, right? So expectations, I think, is also a key thing that we should look at, especially with our relationship with our parents. How are we expecting them to show up for us? How are we expecting our partners, right, our romantic partners, to show up for ourselves? And how are we showing up for ourselves? Are we able to show up for ourselves in that same way? And if the answer is no, then is it fair for us to have this expectation from anyone else? And also, if it's something that's really important to us, how can we begin to show up for ourselves in a way that we can really meet those needs from within, right? Um, and then also, it's also important to look at how we were shown like love and affection. Were we told, I love you every time that we saw our parents, like to a point where maybe it was like too much, and now we're expecting that from our partners, or we're wanting to give that and feeling confused when that's not being reciprocated? Was it not said at all, and it's something that we struggle to show and to say and to express, right? So a lot of, as you guys can see, a lot of this is looking at our current relationships and the frustrations that we may have around it, and then tracing it back to how we were modeled that as children, so that we can start to really look at that and shift, how we're communicating, right? How we're expressing, because we're not trying to change anyone else, but we're just trying to, find that wholeness within, so that we're not expecting anything, right, from anyone outside of ourselves. And if we are, then we're willing and we're able to communicate that in a loving way, right? And how is love being affirmed, right? So these are all things that we can ask. Quality time, I think, is also something to look at. Was quality time, present in your relationship with your parents? How do you view quality time now in your friendships, your relationships? Were acts of service done to show love, right? So I kind of went into looking at some of the love languages and how those showed up in your relationships with the mother and the father. And then also we can look at, so romantic relationships, if we're in relationships with a masculine being or a feminine being, is that being mirrored back to us in the same way, those expectations? Or, if it's not a romantic relationship, we can look at friendships or our siblings with, these masculine and feminine beings, right? People, to see if there's like a common thread and a common pattern there, and what our role is in that relationship. And I wanted to also say, oh, I'm losing it, about masculine and feminine dynamics. I can't remember, but maybe it'll come back to me when we go more into like the energies of it. But some more questions. Yeah, what was the role of gifts in this relationship? Was positive or negative reinforcement something that was taught to you? How does that showing up for you now? Was the love conditional or unconditional? And I think this is extremely important, because this will show up, in all areas of our life, especially around our primary relationship, which is the one to the self, right? And if we were modeled love that may have been, given in a way that was unconditional from the consciousness of the parent at that time, and didn't feel unconditional as the child, that's also something to look at, right? Because a lot of the times when we start to dive into this, we can kind of see, and when we start to take that responsibility for ourselves now in our life, right? How we're showing up in our relationships, we can see that a lot of the times we're not intending to hurt anyone, or we're not intending to make someone feel like they're not loved unconditionally or seen or heard or all of these things, right? And so that can also help for us to be a little bit more compassionate toward what we experienced as children and how we perceived it versus how our parent may have perceived certain situations, or siblings, and why that may be different. And also for highly sensitives, I know everyone that, is in this space would identify as maybe an empath or highly sensitive. And this, we have extremely sensitive nervous systems. So, the slightest things can create this really like adverse effect on our nervous system, where we're either feeling like we've got to fight, we're going to escape or flight, right, freeze. These are all responses of trauma when the nervous system is being overstimulated. And another thing I wanted to point out was also looking at our role with food and nourishment, because this is another thing. This has been huge in my journey, and this is something I'm really going into right now. And I think it's just so interesting how food and love and our emotions are so intertwined, and we can kind of look at how food was given or celebrated, or, given as maybe a reward, or to give comfort or to show love, right? If you had a parent that loved to cook and would love to just, show you their love by feeding you and things like this, right? Even as babies, right? We cry, and what's the first thing that a mother will normally think the child needs? Boob, right? It goes straight to food. And maybe food wasn't always like a need that we have. So then we start to develop these tricky relationships with food, where we're turning to food when really there's another need that needs to be met. So it's really just becoming more aware of our needs in every moment, right? Checking in with ourselves every morning, every day. What do I need? How can I be there for you? How can I show up for you? And also being intentional when things arise and we notice that our needs are not being met, that we can kind of just remove ourselves from certain situations, especially with our parents, our partners, our loved ones, our really close relationships, and tend to ourselves, right? And ensure that we're providing ourselves with the need that we need in a way that we need it, so that we're not kind of projecting onto others and blaming others for our needs not being met, right? That's how we get trapped in this victim consciousness, where it's always everyone else's fault and we're victims, right? When really, yes, there's a time and a place for that, but there's always something that we can do and look at, right, to take responsibility so that these patterns don't continue to repeat themselves. Does that make sense? Oh, Rena's uh, in the waiting room. Hopefully she wasn't there too long. Yeah, does that make sense? Are there any questions? Hey, Ren, I'm so sorry if you were in there for a while.
Hey, that's okay. I'm sorry I'm late.
No, it's all good. Thank you for letting me know, though.
You're welcome.
But yeah, we just kind of went into an introduction, I guess you could say, about identifying the mother and the father wounds, which is really has a lot to do with self-reflection, right? Recognizing, and I know, we're working together one-on-one, so we've been doing this work together, but just awareness, right? And understanding that once there's awareness, we're able to begin this healing process. But I won't go too far back into, summarizing what we did. You can definitely watch the recording. But yeah, I just want to make sure, Heather, we're doing okay. There's no questions as of yet. We're good. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. I kind of went into this how, we're seeing others basically as a mirror, right? So we're able to come into our relationships with anyone, right? Whether it's the mother, the father, or anyone else. And there's so many nuances in this. I think it can be a little bit toxic when we take it like, as at face value that everything is a mirror. Yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is you exactly showing up as exactly as you are, right? But there's always going to be something that is being revealed in that mirror, right? So it could be a trait that maybe you have already healed and you're seeing that within themselves that they haven't healed. Or it could be a trait within yourself that you have completely kind of neglected or suppressed, and seeing that someone has this kind of healed aspect of the like within themselves is kind of triggering you as well, right? To kind of guide you as to like, where you can go deeper into this, right? There's if there's a trigger, there's a wound, right? And we can go into that. And it could also show up as um yeah, just like a total direct mirror, right? And this can be in like a really positive way where you can find, your friendships, your relationships, you'll become more attracted to people who are, resonating at a similar frequency, right? You're on the same wavelength. Or you can come across someone who is like completely in a whole different state of consciousness, right? And then there's, okay, that mirror showing you that we're just in different places, right? Different spaces. So yeah, it's very nuanced, and it's also like that, I believe, so that we can really practice discernment and we can really learn to discern truth and understand resonance, right? What feels right? What is being revealed? What is the gift? What is the lesson here? And I just want to make sure I covered everything here. Yeah, I talked to the compassion, right? We can see how we're not always intentionally trying to inflict harm on others. And also, yeah, remembering that we are learning from our experiences, right? And that they are gifts, right? As hard and heavy as some of our past traumas and experiences may be, the more that we can kind of sit with them and we can bring that loving awareness to them and begin to reparent ourselves and build that unconditional love for self, the more love and compassion and acceptance and forgiveness we're going to have for others, which is just such a beautiful thing. And it's our true nature. It's what we are, right? We are all love. It's all about love at the end of the day. And that's what this is all, this whole experience is showing us and revealing us, even though it can feel like that wasn't true, right? We're not attaching to these experiences and identifying with them as the true self, right? All the self, right, that the ego creates, right, the identity that we create about ourselves is all just conditions, right? Conditioned beliefs, programming, things that we have received from others that they believed were true, that were then passed on to us, that we believed were true. And they're just beliefs, and we can let go of things, right? We can move on from that. We can change them, right? We can essentially totally rewrite our brain and take on completely new beliefs that are more in alignment with who we are and what we are. So yeah, when it comes to working with the inner child, it's important to understand that we are multidimensional beings and that time does not exist in the way that we think it does on this, in this world, and that past, present, and future are simply more layered, right? It's not like what we see it as being the past and the future in a linear way. It's almost more of like a stacked way in different dimensions. And so when we can understand this, we can understand that there's aspects of our past self and our future self or our higher self that are present with us at all times in all moments, right? And that we have so much power to connect with all of these dimensional layers of ourself and of our being and versions of ourself as well, to go back in time to connect with past versions of ourselves, or what we're calling the inner child today. And this can be the inner child, this could be the inner teenager, this could be, a past version of yourself 2 or 3 years ago, right? But today we're focusing more on the inner child just because we're talking about kind of the mother-father dynamic. But I'm also trying to say, this can be used with all relationships, right? And all versions of ourselves. And it can also be used with the future self, or the higher self even, and we'll do that in another class. But yeah, so the inner child, I think it's so important that we come back to this part of ourselves, especially now with everything that's going on. There's a need for creativity and for just fun, right? We've been working so hard, and a lot of us are under so much stress, and we've been so conditioned to become completely detached from the inner child. And what I see is, this should be our main goal, is to reconnect with the inner child, because at its core, that is the pure whole being that we are desiring to remember and to realize, right? As children, when we were first born and completely unconditioned, unprogrammed, right? That is who our soul really came here to be and to express. And so we can start by really connecting with, those versions of ourselves as children. What did we love to do? What brought us the most joy, right? And starting to create more time for us to really engage in certain um, activities and allow our inner child to just come out and play. Like I'll go for walks and I'll do friggin' snow angels and play on the swings and all of these things with the intention of reconnecting with my inner child and allowing that spark, that joy, to just come out. And the more that we can do that, the more healing that is for us now. And the more healing it is for just, that version of ourself that is basically being suppressed because we think that we're adults and we're not allowed to have fun and we're not allowed to be childish. We have to be responsible in all of these things, but that's a huge part of ourself that we can often just completely suppress. So that's one way. And I think it's important to really do that because a lot of this work can be really heavy and can be deep and it can feel really serious sometimes. And I know, you guys have been doing this work and there's times of just complete intensity and pain and release. And yeah, it's not an easy path to walk, but when we can balance that with play and fun and creativity and really connecting with this aspect of the inner child, so much healing can come from that as well. And then again, which I've been talking about pretty much the whole class, is really going back to reparent. So we were kind of talking about becoming the parent and parenting ourselves in every moment, attending to our needs. But then we can also go back when things arise, right? When there's a memory, say, that comes up, or if you're sitting down and doing some journaling and wanting to intentionally, work on healing your mother wound or work on healing your father wound, whatever memory is coming up, or maybe there was, a parent that would always say something that, oh, you'll never be able to do that, or you're a terrible singer, you should never sing, or, you're fat and ugly, or whatever, right? Whatever it was that we were told that was like really hurtful, we can go back and we can do this through meditation, or really just closing the eyes and setting the intention to connect with that version of ourselves. And I will be guiding this meditation after. So you guys have the template for that. And we can just really be there for our inner child and offer them the love, the support, the attention that they may have needed at the time. Or we can really just kind of show up and say exactly what we wish was said to us at that time. So then we can really start to reprogram, that inner critic or that voice that is, repeating that program. Does that make sense? And this comes with consistency. So it's not one of those things that you do this meditation once and then it's done. You don't ever have to go back for your inner child. You're fully healed. Maybe that has not been my experience. This is something that I still do to this day. If I'm at a family dinner and something's coming up, I'll excuse myself and go to the bathroom and just just call in my inner child and Vanessa, I love you so much. You're so seen. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. And really giving ourselves that love. And that is how things really start to shift when there's this consistency. Because a lot of the times, and I've talked about this before, um, there's this core wound of abandonment, right? Where if our needs were not being met, we felt like we were abandoned or we weren't giving the attention that we needed. And if we're not able to give ourselves that attention, then there's another layer of abandonment and we're creating self abandonment, right? So it's really, if we're setting this intention and we're wanting to do this work, it's really important for us to honor um, the relationship that we're creating with ourselves. And if you told a little child that you'll always be there for them, and then things would arise and you would just completely abandon them, or ignore them, or not do anything, how do you think that child is going to feel, right? And that's exactly what's happening with us, right? When we're cultivating and really starting to nurture and love and reparent ourselves. So the more consistent we can be, the more profound results we're going to get when it comes to really unconditionally loving ourselves, right? Which is going to be, what we're wanting to give to everyone. And I think it's also important to point out when it comes to unconditional love, because there's fine lines here too, right? There's nuances here, because yes, that doesn't mean loving and accepting everyone if that has hurt us and allowing them in. We can love them, but there's still boundaries, right? And to fully love someone unconditionally would mean that we're not going to allow them to treat us in an abusive way, or in a way that can be very toxic and very, um, you know, manipulative or whatever, right? Because then we're not helping them either, right? We're just enabling that behavior. So it's so important to understand that when we talk about unconditional love, boundaries are extremely important. Knowing what you will tolerate to be around and what you will not, and also knowing how we can kind of love someone from a distance, or send, I don't want to say send them our love, we don't need to send love, they are love, but um to acknowledge that there is love there, and compassion and forgiveness. Forgiveness is huge, because we're only hurting ourselves if we're not allowing ourselves to forgive, certain situations that may have happened in the past, because we're still carrying that, right? We're still holding onto that. And if there's anything I've learned in my journey, is that forgiveness will set you free. Um, but it's also boundaries, right? And knowing what is acceptable and what's not. And that's basically, for everyone to decide. But I think if there's ever any form of abuse, then that's just simply just not love to keep that around and to feed that, right? Because a lot of the times, yeah, when we look at kind of like the empath and the narcissist, or this is a common program that I think a lot of empaths or highly sensitives come into contact with narcissists or narcissistic behavior because it's like that food source, and the empath is so sensitive and wanting to help and wanting to give love and can feel the pain of the narcissist or the abuser, and have so much compassion for them. But there also needs to be an understanding that um, we can remove ourselves from situations that are inflicting more harm on us as well as the other person, right? So we're not enabling any toxic behavior. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then I also wanted to share with you guys this, you may be aware of it. I know, Rena, we talked about this last week, Ho'oponopono, but this is a Hawaiian prayer, which is really beautiful. I will send in the email with the recording a song that has like the whole mantra. It's basically a healing mantra that was used to heal ancestral lineages, and it's really beautiful. And basically there's the shortened version, which is really just, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And this is kind of repeated and chanted over and over. You can also just listen to it. For Mother's Day one year, I made, like, on Canva, a really nice print with these words, and I gifted it to my mom for Mother's Day. She didn't really get it, but I was like, yeah, it was trying to be a gift of, expressing my my gratitude for her, and also trying to heal kind of the relationship that we have, which was always great, but there's still things, right? And so I think for parents too, sometimes they can take things personally, and yeah, it can all, we can see how they may also feel guilty for some of the things. And once you start on this healing journey and they see that, it can be extremely, extremely triggering for our parents and, friends and family members and people who are not on this journey, because it's really just triggering their own wounds, but also knowing that's theirs to deal with, right? All we're responsible for is ourselves and healing ourselves. So yeah, that's pretty much all I think I'll go into with really the inner child dynamic. Does that make sense? Is that something you guys, I'm sure you guys are probably already doing this in a way. The meditation will help if you've never done doing like a direct meditation to connect with your inner child. This can be really beautiful. So that can be really helpful. We'll do that after. But before we go into the masculine and feminine dynamics and the energies there, I wanted to share something with you guys. So just as I was preparing for the masterclass, I actually received this email about this like trauma conference that I had signed up for. And I decided to take a break, and I was watching this video and I was like, wow, this like really resonates with, what I'm sharing and wanting to talk about in the class. So it's these are called the 5 layers of compassion. And I think this is so essential for us to understand when it comes to healing the mother and the father wound and all relationships, including to self, and also when holding space for others that are that are going through similar challenges within their relationships. And this was shared by Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm not sure, he recently did this documentary. Yeah, you guys have heard about it, right? Oh shit, what's it called? Wisdom of Trauma or something. Um, I'm not sure if he shared this in the documentary. This was a different presentation that I was watching, but he went into these 5 layers of compassion. So the first one is just ordinary human compassion, right? This is basically connected to the definition of compassion, which is to suffer with, right? To suffer with another, to really know and feel when someone is suffering, and we can kind of be there with them through their suffering. This is really the empath's journey, right? The second one was compassion of understanding. So, really wanting to understand why suffering is there and what happened. So, when it comes to looking at the mother wound, the father wound, we can allow ourselves to also get curious about how they're suffering, how they were suffering, right? What their upbringing was like, all of these things, so that we can really come to an understanding of like the wholeness of our experiences, right? Understanding that, yes, we also suffered, and we can kind of look at what happened there, right? This is self inquiry, but also looking at the other person, right? The other side of that relationship and where they have suffered. Compassion of recognition. So this can show up when working with others, and can also be a mirror for ourselves. So we already kind of talked about like the mirroring aspect, but this is where we're really recognizing certain traits, behaviors, or aspects that may hold and possess. That may also hold and possess to varying degrees. So, yeah, that we would hold, right? So, recognizing, so say you have a narcissistic father, turning that mirror around. How am I being a narcissist in my life? Am I being a narcissist? Am I being controlling? Am I right? Am I wanting everything to be all about me, right? And so this isn't a way to, shame ourselves or feel guilty, but it's just this ability to look at ourselves, right? And to just, be open to the possibility that, hey, clearly they probably had a parent or some sort of program that they learned as children. Now you're my parent, so I've also learned from you. So there's chances that these are traits or qualities that I may also possess. And this can be the hardest thing for us to look at, because a lot of the times we don't want to be like our parents, and we're like, oh, I'm nothing like them, or I can never be like them, or I will never be like them. But really, they're our biggest mirrors, right? When we really understand how programming and conditioning works, there's a lot that we can learn when we're able to kind of turn the mirror around and see that, and the nuances with it, right? It's not saying that you're your father and you're your mother. I'm not saying that at all. But yeah, there's a few golden nuggets I'm sure you'll find if you can allow yourself to go there. And it also helps us to know ourselves better and to hold deeper compassions for other people, right? And then we go into compassion of truth, which I recently wrote a post on, the importance of truth in our spiritual development. And this is something that I think is so important, especially right now, with everything that we're experiencing collectively. Truth is, there's so much information, and we're really needing to be able to discern truth, and understanding that there's subjective truth, and we all hold our own lens and our own truth, but then there's also the universal truth, right? What actually happened, or what's actually going on. And so understanding that the truth will also set us free, it's what liberates us. And so we're not trying to protect ourselves or the other from pain, right? Nor are we trying to inflict pain, because truth, as we know, there's usually going to be some element of pain that shows up because the truth hurts, right? Let's be honest, when we're fully honest with ourselves or fully honest with another person, it can be painful. It can be hard to hear. It can be hard to receive. But the intention is not to inflict pain either. We're not running away from pain, nor are we running towards it. There's no intention or desire to cause suffering. The intention is to be honest and to find truth and true love and compassion. And so much suffering is really created by our refusal to look at truth, right? Avoidance, running away, escaping, which creates more and more suffering because there's something there and we know there's something there and something's not working or we're feeling stagnant in our life, but we're afraid to really acknowledge our role in why we feel a certain way, right? And it all comes down to us, right? It really does. And so when we can be really honest with ourselves and really truthful and with others as well, right? If we're in a space where they're wanting support and guidance, this is one of the hardest things that I have to do in my one-on-ones is like, be the mirror and have to kind of, be brutally honest with people, but also knowing it's one of the most loving things that we can do. So when it comes to healing the mother and father wound, acknowledging your pain and having conversations and difficult conversations and being able to communicate openly and honestly with your parents and express maybe ways that they are hurting you or have hurt you. Also celebrating when they're making progress and you're making progress. And I think communication is just key here, and the ability to just be open and honest with one another. And so when we believe like the illusions of the lies, that's what creates the suffering, right? So this comes back to like our programming, right? When we're believing all of that, that's creating and perpetuating more and more suffering. So when we can be honest with ourselves, then that's when the freedom begins to really take place. Yeah, and we identify that which we are not, and this is how we get closer to really understanding the true self, right? That's why we say the true self, our true nature, because it has nothing to do with these programs and these lies that we have told ourselves or that we have believed. And so we deny aspects of ourselves, which essentially get in the way of our ability to see and to express our true nature, true divine nature. And if we want to achieve any form of spiritual mastery, this has to be embodied, right? Our coming back to wholeness and coming back to our true nature, which we'll only get there through looking at truth and being fully open and honest with ourselves. And compassion of possibility is the last one. And this one I really love because what we're doing is we're really holding space for the other person's highest potential, right? For them to rise into their highest self, their highest expression. So, for your mom or for your dad or for whoever it is that, you're really struggling with, whatever relationship that may be, when we can have all of these layers of compassion and we can really just set the intention that there's a possibility for change, there's a possibility for transformation, and we're not writing it off like, oh, they'll never change, or they're just like that, or whatever, right? The more that we focus on ourselves and the more that we do this inner work, you guys will see, and I'm sure you're already seeing it, is the ripple that this creates. And you'll come into you'll have a conversation with your mom or your dad and they'll surprise you and you'll be like, what? Like, what happened? And, it's not to discredit anything that they're doing because they may be doing some inner work, but the work that you're doing within yourself is modeling that for them. And it's also energetically, we are all connected and this will, heal so many relationships, both past and future, right? Because when we can heal these aspects of ourselves, when it comes to giving birth and having children, we've broken a lot of these cycles or a lot of these patterns. So we're not continuing to pass those on to further generations. But then also knowing that, our connection, with the unified field of consciousness is allowing, the more we shift our consciousness and the more we raise and expand our consciousness, the more that expands the whole collective consciousness, and especially those within our lineage, right? So, you have such a profound effect on all of the relationships in your life. And this is probably one of the most beautiful, magical things that I have witnessed in my own journey. And I know, you guys are starting to see this and feel this too. And it's just, yeah, it's such a gift, right? And so, a lot. But here this is a little bit more inner child stuff, but I already kind of went into this at the beginning. It's just doing that self-reflection on, what do I need, right? What are my needs? Looking at your needs and how can I provide those for myself. And why do we want to do this? Well, this is going to help build a deeper relationship and connection to self, right? This is going to heal self-abandonment, allow us to really love ourselves unconditionally, take emotional responsibility for ourselves, and really understanding that we're healing with awareness, right? It's our awareness that does the healing. It's the energy of awareness, of consciousness, God, right? That's what this is. That is healing us. We're seeing ourselves through the eyes of God, right? And that's with loving awareness, compassion, acceptance, forgiveness, unconditional love. Okay, so now, if we have any questions, I'll take a little break. I think it's pretty straightforward, things you already know. I'm just reminding you. But anyway, I love this topic, going into the divine masculine, divine feminine frequencies, and just understanding that these energies are so potent and so important on our spiritual journey, because basically, from my understanding, my vantage point right now, what we are here to do is to really come into divine union with our inner masculine and our inner feminine to create wholeness, right? There's been this basically separation. We've been separated from our creator, God, source, the universe, whatever you want to call it, and a separation from Mother God, Father God, and the child of God, right? I see this as a holy trinity. And so when there can be this marriage, I want to call it, of those energies, the masculine, the feminine, the being, the doing, the action, the intention, the action, the intuition, right? All of these feminine and masculine energies show up in all of us in varying degrees. So this is something that I'm still really integrating, and there needs to be like a willingness to go within and to really, feel into these energies. They're going to show up differently for all of us and in different ways. I will share some slides that I've created so that we can kind of really understand these energies a little bit more. But first of all, it's looking at our relationships, right? Our relationships with the men in our life, our relationships with the women in our life, how that was modeled to us in our primary years as children. And then how did that affect our relationship with that energy within, right? So if we have maybe a difficult relationship with our father, what is our masculine energy like? Do we feel like we're safe? Do we feel protected? Do we feel like we're able to take action on things and do what we need to do? How is our relationship with our mother? How is our relationship with the inner feminine, right? Are we connected to just being and able to just be passive and not have to go and chase things like the masculine, right? The masculine is all about doing and yeah, like it's very active, right? So what is our relationship to being more receptive and passive and open? And there can be so many layers around this because maybe our mother was very embodied in her feminine energy, but we have some belief that that's wrong, or she was, oppressed by the masculine, because right, there's even with feminism, right? There's so much beauty with this feminism movement, but there's also a lot of suppression of the true feminine, that I've had to go into and peel back so many layers around this, where we want equality and we want all of these things, but there's also needs to be an understanding that these are two completely different energies for a reason, and that needs to be honored. um, but yeah, there's so many nuances and so many layers here, but it's just something that we can be aware of when it comes to the energies, right? At the core, the feminine is very receptive, right? And I don't want to say submissive, but in a way, it is, right? And so I'm going to share my screen because I have um, slides. These are actually from my course. Where is it? Yeah, so these are actually from Activating Sacral Powers, which is a course that I created last year. But I thought these kind of go with this class where we're really understanding the masculine and the feminine energies. So when we look at the feminine, right, this is the yin, right? This is also known as omega. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I just kind of wrote down all these words that came to mind when I really tuned into the feminine, right? It's fluid, right? Our ability to go with the flow, it's our being, it's passive, that flow state, it's feeling, it's emotions, right? It's intuition, creative expression, uh, it's resilient, right? It's very much the heart's desire, right? So the feminine is very much living in her heart and connected to her heart's desire. Very spiritual energy, very vulnerable, compassionate. Um, this is not the best one. Trusting, inclusive, open, receptive, collaborative, magnetic, devoted, soft, empathetic, and surrendered, right? We talked about the feminine too in the Dark Night of the Soul masterclass when we went into like the true feminine and the darkness and all of that as well, right? So it's the ability to really to go there, right? To go into the darkness and to not run from things. And then the masculine is the light, right? It's the container, it's what holds the feminine, right? We can think of the feminine being water and the masculine kind of being the glass, right? It's the supportive container. It's also that part of us that can do and take action. It's more consistent, stable, decisive, grounded. It's more analytical, so it's more like the mind, where the feminine is more kind of like the heart mind, very calculated and scientific, in its head a lot of thinking, a lot of logic, a lot of discipline and planning, very organized, initiating its life force, right? So we have the feminine that's kind of both of them, right? We can see how they go together, where it's a dance between both of the energies. We can't have one without the other. And so we can just kind of look at these traits and just see, where are they showing up for us, right? For myself personally, I would consider myself a very feminine essenced being. All of these feminine qualities are something that feels so comfortable to me and just very dominant in my being, right? And then when I look at the masculine, I really struggle with a lot of these things like structure and discipline and organization and being like analytical. I'm very like intuitive based and very fluid. I like to just not have plans, like, that feels very like constricting for me. And then I look at my relationships to both my mother and father, and my relationship with my father was definitely the most difficult relationship that I've had to heal so much. And there was a lot of abuse, a lot of just, yeah, it was a really difficult relationship. And so obviously that's going to show up in my relationship to my inner masculine, right? Where I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable having all of these things, right? And so through healing my relationship with my father, which also I think it's important to point out, I forgot to point this out before, the father, there's a lot of energies around our relationship with God as well. And the more that we can heal our relationship with the Father, in my experience, and from a lot of what I've read of other women sharing as well, is they have come closer and closer to God, because there's a lot of conditioning around that as well. The Father being, we see the Father being represented as God quite a bit, right? Or the Son, the Christ, right? So this is super connected in my opinion. So we can just kind of see how that shows up. And then through healing that relationship, I'm able to show up with a lot more organization. I understand structure and systems and all of these things, focus, having goals, these masculine qualities, because this aspect of myself is no longer wounded, right? Or not as wounded. I won't say it's no longer wounded. There's still work to be done. But yeah, we can kind of see how that shows up. So I'm just curious if this resonates with you guys, if you can kind of feel like just feeling into your dynamics with the mother and the father, if this resonates. It may not, right? It may be that because if, for example, the relationship with the father wasn't as strong, you've really cultivated subconsciously a strong inner masculine because you needed that, right? If your father wasn't always there, maybe you've really kind of showed up to be that father for yourself in a way, right? So that we can see how this is all nuanced, but that's up to you to kind of just feel into and see how that shows up for you. And then we'll go into here. So I have the wounded masculine, right? So if we have, for example, any sort of wounding from a masculine being or just around this energy, the common traits that this shows up as is the perpetrator, right? So maybe we're projecting all men as being perpetrators, right? Controlling, dominant, or this can be a certain, masculine figure in our life that is showing up this way. If we're, you know, constantly coming into relationships with men that hold these qualities, right, then we can see, okay, there's their masculine is wounded, but that's also reflecting that my masculine is wounded. Otherwise, this wouldn't be here, right? If I've healed this within myself, I would be able to identify that, and that just wouldn't be for me, right? We wouldn't be an energetic match, right? So whatever shows up in our reality, again, right? It's that mirror. There's a reason why it's showing up. So if does that make sense? You guys see how this will show up in different ways? So yeah, highly focused on goals and success, to a point where it's just obscene, right? Like no time for anything else, just super goal oriented. Overworking, like really like a workaholic, right? Not being able to take time off and chill. Overthinking, abuse of power, aggression, overly competitive, maybe withdrawn, right? If something happens, not able to confront things and really just withdrawing from them. Angry, right? Anger, which can be either just like suppressed or justifying your anger, right? There's a reason you made me angry, or because you did this. So, of course I'm going to be angry, right? We're kind of blaming the other. Highly critical, unsupportive, unstable, abusive, manipulative, forceful, demanding, avoidant. And this can also show up with addictions, right? Whether that be addictions to work, substances, sex, TV, right? All of these things, food. So just kind of looking if any of these traits resonate with you. Um, yeah, take it as an invitation for you to go deeper into that, and know that this is just showing something that's wanting your attention, right? And that we can kind of look at and come into the divine masculine, which we'll get into after we do the wounded feminine. So the wounded feminine, same but with feminine energy or feminine beings, which is the victim, right? We have the masculine is the perpetrator, the feminine is the victim consciousness we spoke about earlier. Can be very manipulative, overly emotional, super needy or attached, right? Very codependent. And also knowing like men, right? Men can show up with this as well, and women can show up with the wounded masculine, if I didn't already say that. Lack of confidence, right? Really insecure, unable to speak their truth, right? Or unable to communicate in an open and honest way. Unable to manage emotions, so overly sensitive, but not just being sensitive to energies or being sensitive, but to a point where you can't manage your emotions, right? Or you're projecting everything. Powerless or overly submissive, right? We talked about the feminine being submissive, but not giving away in a way that we're giving away our power, right? Seek love outside of themselves. I think all of us can, relate to this, mostly because of our conditioning. So remembering that we are love, we don't need to look for it. It's not found outside of us. Judgmental, feelings of unworthiness, body image issues, feelings of guilt and shame, overly dramatic, weak boundaries, over explaining themselves, self-abandonment, insecure, and inauthentic. And I can't stress enough that we are all going to have a wounded feminine because we live in a patriarchal society, and the feminine has been extremely oppressed and extremely abused and extremely wounded. And we are going through a time where there's a massive awakening in the divine feminine, and this is clearing, and we're seeing that, and we are bringing the planet back to balance. And the more that we can kind of go within and we can see this within ourselves and heal these aspects of ourselves, the more we'll see that reflected back to us in our collective consciousness and our collective reality. So women especially, yes, we're all gonna have this, right? This is just what it is right now with our programming or conditioning from these times. And so are there any questions on any of those? I know I kind of just ran through them quickly, but you guys are good. That makes sense. And then lastly, yeah. So this is just a quick slide. This is really just, I love this because nature, I think, is one of our biggest teachers as well. And when we can see, nature also as being a mirror for us, that can be really beautiful and powerful. And so we can look to the earth, right? The mother, the divine mother, and we can look to the sun as the father, the divine father, right? And I would really, encourage you guys to feel into this yourself, right? When you're connecting with the earth, right? Really feeling into the mothering, the loving, the nurturing aspects of her as the divine mother, right? Using this energy to heal, as well as the sun, setting the intention Today I'm going for a walk. It's beautiful, it's sunny. I'm going to take my shoes off, and I'm going to ground into the earth, and I'm going to sunbathe or whatever, right? Like maybe not now, it's the winter. Heather, you're in beautiful Nicaragua. What a beautiful place to be doing this. Sunbathing and asking, right, the Divine Father to heal and to cleanse you of all that isn't in your highest alignment, right? And so we can use these energies and these frequencies. They're there. They want us to connect with them. And so I get emotional talking about this because it's so beautiful, right? When we're present and we're aware of this. And so, and we can set that intention, right? Every walk that you go on now is just going to be a beautiful healing experience when we set that intention. So I don't want to go through this too much. You guys can kind of, when you tune into the earth, what does she emanate, right? When you tune into the sun, what does he emanate? These are the divine qualities, the divine principles of those energies. And then I'm going to go into, just so we can kind of break this down, we went into the wounded aspects, but then we also have the divine union, right? So when we're able to heal the wounded aspects of both of those energies and bring them together, and also understanding that there's no like 50-50 balance. That's not what this means. It doesn't mean that you have to be like in your feminine energy in one moment and then in your masculine the next, or like, you hear in the new age, and I was guilty of this too at one point, where it's like, oh, I'm in my feminine today and all of this, right? It's a unification of these energies, and we're coming into union and creating that wholeness again, right? We're coming back to that wholeness. And so, when we can see that unification, the masculine aspect show up confidently and doesn't take things personally, leads with courage, compassion, and purpose, right? This is us, right? These are all the qualities that we will possess and we hold. Radically honest and take accountability for our actions, humble and lives with integrity, able to create a safe and supportive environment, empowering and encouraging, acts from a place of service and committed to the greatest and highest good for all, doesn't judge self or others, right? Deeply present and is able to listen and hold space for others or for oneself even. Decisive and confident in decision making, self-aware and discerning, or able to discern, has discipline and able to stay focused when needed. And then we also have, the beautiful feminine qualities that show up as being deeply connected to your heart and guided by your intuition, able to surrender and flow through life with ease and grace and just trust, right? Creative and is able to co-create and manifest, right, their desired life. And we also, when it comes to co-creation and manifestation, we have to understand again, right, that 95% of the time we're running on our subconscious programming. So if we haven't gone in to look at those subconscious programs, right, that we spoke about, that normally will come from the parents, right, from our upbringing and society in our later life, then of course we're going to have struggles creating this dream life, because we're acting from our subconscious or wounded programmed versions, right? Or aspect of self, right? We're not in control of creating the life that we want to. We're running on autopilot. And so, yeah, that will shift, right? You can show up authentically and vulnerably, devoted to unconditional love, open and honest communication. You guys get the gist, right? And so, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Yeah, I think so. Do we have any questions about divine union or how we can cultivate this, or?
I think I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said earlier that like maybe a male figure would kind of wound the male energy in us. But how is there any other way that our feminine energy or masculine energy can be wounded? Like if someone called us failures, like does that mean like my masculine energy is being wounded?
Yeah, with when it comes to like failure, anything to do with like success or work or, that kind of energy, then yeah, that would kind of take a hit on that masculine part of you, right? Because it's feeling like it's being attacked or, yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it could be your mother or your sister.
It could be anyone, right? It could be a
Yeah.
feminine, like a woman. It could be non-binary, right? Like it's really understanding that these are qualities that are within all of us to varying degrees. And yeah, I think I went into trying to say like it's not necessarily 50-50. And we also have to kind of locate like some people, some men are going to show up as more like feminine essenced beings, right? And we see this in in same-sex relationships, right? A lot of this is polarity, right? This is how attraction is created. And when we understand that everything in this universe is really these energies at their core, right? The positive and the negative and the negative, blah, the negative, right? This is in everything. And this is what creates, life, right? So that's like, yeah, it's really important to understand that this will show up in varying degrees, right? And we look at the earth as being the mother and the sun as being the father, but they also still have, masculine traits, right? But we can kind of see when we look at, anything that grows from the earth, it needs the sun, it needs that life force energy to grow, right? And there is this need for both of them to create life, right? And that unity. So that's what it doesn't mean that they have to be balanced, but they need to be harmonized. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much.
and that answers your question about, and also I just want to reiterate that like it it doesn't matter so much of like, did this incident wound my inner masculine, or did he wound my inner feminine, or she, or anything like that, but it's just understanding the overall qualities of these energies and how they show up. I wouldn't worry so much about like pinpointing exactly what aspect of yourself is wounded, but when we can kind of look at a greater whole, like looking at, you know, some of those wounded qualities, or looking at some of these more divine qualities, where are we kind of lacking, or what do we struggle with, right? And if it's more the masculine, then that's an invitation to kind of look at that more. If it's more the feminine, look at that. But we have to look at all of it, right? Otherwise, it's incomplete. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. I know it's getting late, and I do want to try and get a meditation in. And also, we talked about just holding space for you guys to share if there's anything you want to share off camera. How are we doing? I have one more blurb around returning to our true nature. And then maybe I'll check in and see if you guys want to do the meditation, or we can save that for later and I can just send that and you can do that on your own time. So first I'll go into this. So returning to our true nature, and I briefly talked about this, but it's really just understanding, right, that these wounds can run really deep, and a lot of them are core wounds, right, that we're kind of exposing and that are being revealed. And it's easy for the mind to perceive us as being wounded, right? So when we talk about like the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine, at your core, you remain untouched, right? So when we go into, and I was trying to bring us there with our first couple of master classes when we were doing embodied presence, and when we can really tune into, you know, that loving awareness, this consciousness that connects us all, that keeps us all together in this unified field, being present in the present moment, right? There's this presence, right, that begins to emerge from the heart. And the more that we do this, the more that we'll feel that, and this unconditional love that we are, and this remembering, right? This realization, this recognition of who we are at our core. And when we see that that aspect of ourselves remains completely untouched. It's eternal, right? It's constant. It doesn't change. I mean, it evolves and it grows and it's beautiful, but it's impossible for it to be wounded, right? It's literally, we're just observers, we're witnesses, we're awareness, right? So we're being aware of all of these experiences, but that core, right? At our core, we remain untouched. Okay. So I think it's just really important to not take on that energy of like, oh, I'm broken, or I'm so wounded, or I have so many problems and so much work I need to do and so much I need to heal. Well, yes, having that awareness of that is healing in itself, right? Because having that awareness is really coming into the realization of who we are at our core, our true nature. And the more that we can connect with that awareness and that loving awareness, the more that this will just automatically be revealed to us if it hasn't already. And so the ego will create all of these illusions of who you are and of the self, but it's not our true nature, right? It's just our programming. Okay. And yeah, so we're really just going in and we're connecting to our soul essence, right? That's all this is remembering and really, really connecting to who we are at our core, which is the divine masculine, the divine feminine in complete union, in complete marriage with God. Okay, which I think is beautiful. It's really, I wanted to end it on that note. This is only something that we can really come into through experience. You've probably heard this many times. You will continue to hear this many times. But the more we practice these things, the more that we go inward, the more that we set the intention to cultivate wholeness, or not even cultivate, it's already there, but to come back to wholeness and asking God to cleanse and purify our entire being, right? Letting go of all that no longer serves us and being brave and courageous enough to let go and to forgive and to accept and to love unconditionally, the more that our true nature will be revealed to us. Okay. And so that being said, how are you guys doing? It's 20 to 9. Are you guys wanting to do a little bit of like sharing, or would you prefer to do a meditation? Both?
I'm good for both. I have all the free time, so
Good.
yeah.
Me too.
You're good? Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, so I think what we'll do first is we'll do the meditation and then we'll share after that. I'll stop the recording so we can just kind of maintain the sacredness of our container tonight. But go ahead and get comfortable. If you prefer to turn off your camera, go ahead and do so. If it's more comfortable for you to lie down, I also fully support that. You just want to make sure that you're keeping a nice long spine. And once we're comfortable, can close the eyes. And start to bring the attention inward. Just taking a moment to scan the body, noticing any tension, any heaviness, any density that we may be holding on to. And just bringing our awareness to these areas, understanding that a lot of energies can get stored and trapped and stuck in the body that can manifest as feelings of discomfort, pain, heaviness, tension, and even dis-ease, physical illness or diseases. And when we can bring our attention to these spaces and simply allow ourselves to be present and to observe, we may notice that these feelings start to dissolve, these feelings, these sensations, even our thoughts. And we'll start to bring the attention to the breath if we haven't already done so. And really start to slow down our breath. Trying to slow it down to about half speed, anywhere between 5 and 8 seconds, breathing in through the nose and exhaling out through the nose. Not applying any force to our breath, but just allowing ourselves to really slow down, to soften, to relax. And as we continue with this breath, you may start to feel a sense of this breath expanding, almost as if we are breathing through every pore, every cell of our being, all breathing and oscillating the same breath. Perhaps even slowing the breath down just a little bit more. without any strain. We almost want to be breathing in a way that if someone was watching us right now, they would barely even know that we were breathing. It's just a very soft, subtle, long, deep inhale and exhale through the nose. Activating every cell and allowing our breath to expand out into the room. Perhaps even feeling like your entire being is expanding, or we're feeling into our energetic fields, our aura. Calling back all parts, all versions, all soul iterations of our multidimensional being back into our bodies, back into the here and now. Allowing our entire being to come online. If it's in your practice, you can call on your angels, guides, ancestors, guardians, beings of light who are working with God and only God to serve the highest. And if you haven't already done so, you can start to bring the attention into the heart center, the center of your chest. Just slightly the back of the spine, or breathing into this space. As we begin to call upon our inner child, you may want to locate a specific memory, situation from your childhood where you didn't feel fully loved, fully seen, fully received by your caretaker in a way that felt nourishing and supportive for your being. Just allowing whatever memory or whatever situation comes to mind first. Trusting your intuition, trusting that your higher self knows exactly what you're ready, willing, and able to heal at this time. You may also prefer to just connect with your inner child generally, perhaps not traveling back to a specific time, but a specific age or version of yourself that really needed someone, extra support, love, compassion. And once you've located this memory or this version of yourself, start to, using the mind's eye or the third eye, start to bring in visualization. This may also be a feeling, sense, knowing of this part of you, allowing yourself to paint the picture of what you looked like, what you were wearing, how your posture was, how you were feeling, who your favorite pop star was at the time. Whatever comes to mind, really just bring in these energies that were connected to that version of yourself. Trusting that you know exactly what to do. And once we've created that strong visualization or that feeling, sense, knowing of who we are connecting with, we can allow ourselves to visualize, picture, see, sense, feel our current self, our present self in this very moment, showing up for our inner child. What does that look like? Is there anything you would like to communicate to your inner child? Anything you wish to say to her or him? Maybe you want to give them a hug. Tell them you love them. You're there for them. That you're coming back to visit them from the future. And that everything's going to be okay. That you're okay. That look at you now. Look at how far you've come. Look at this beautiful life that you've created and are continuing to build and create. And just taking a couple moments to be present, to engage and interact, exchange messages. Just be open to receiving and to giving whatever is needed and trusting that you know exactly what to do here. Allowing this feeling of unconditional love to flood your entire being, all aspects, all versions, all soul iterations of your true divine self. And before we part ways, I'd like you to reach into your pocket or your purse, your bag. And you're going to find a little bag. And this bag is full of crystals, little trinkets that you've collected throughout your travels. And you're going to open this bag and you're going to offer a piece of your heart to your inner child, allowing her to choose something from the bag to reach their hand in, just noticing what they're pulling out. Telling them that they can keep this piece of you and that they can hold on to it. And that whenever they're needing someone to love them, to see them, to hold them, to hear them, to feel them in such a profound, deep way, that they can take out this object and they can call upon your future self or their future self. They can call upon you, and that you will show up for them and you will be there to guide them, to support them, to hold their hand, and to love them unconditionally. And know that by doing this, you are setting the intention to be there for yourself unconditionally, and that you will hold truth to this promise, to this intention. And whenever your inner child feels triggered, you can come back to this space. You will come back to this space. So we'll just take a moment before we part ways to say our goodbyes. Offering any words of wisdom. Knowing that time does not exist in a way that the mind, the logical mind, perceives it to. And that your inner child, that version of yourself at this very age, received your love in that very moment. And in all moments that you choose to return, to be the parent, to provide this unconditional love, this grace, this compassion, this forgiveness, this acceptance of all versions, all aspects of your soul's incarnate. You may choose to stay here for a minute longer or however much time you need. Or if you've arrived to a sense of completion, can start to bring movement, gentle movement into the body. Perhaps wiggling the fingers, the toes, gently rocking the head back and forth. Allowing the shoulders to just wiggle. Just being very slow and intentional with our movement. As we come back into this space, just moving the body in any way that it needs to. You may have moved a lot of energy. There may be a lot of stuff that may feel kind of stuck, shaking it all out. Perhaps doing a couple rounds of breaths, breathing in through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. And whenever we're ready, we can gently open the eyes. And only when we're ready, just take your time here. All right. Well, I think that we will wrap up the recording. Thank you for everyone that watched this recording. If you made it all the way through, please feel free to send me a message if there's anything that you wanted to share, any questions that you have. I also wanted to share that I do have one-on-one offerings if you are looking to kind of go deeper in a more personal space to explore anything that may have come up during this session or anything that you may be navigating in your own spiritual awakening journey and healing journey. I would love to offer some support and guidance. So you can check out my website. I have all of my offerings available to you there. But thank you so much for being here, and we will continue with the sharing circle off camera. So I'm just going to figure out how I can stop the recording.